All right, welcome to the Gateway API meeting for May 16th. We're trying a different timeout today. Hopefully this is more helpful to people in different time zones than our typical meeting times. Again, just a quick reminder, this is a Kubernetes community meeting, which means we abide by the CNCF's Code of Conduct. A really high-level overview of that is just to be nice to each other. Have not had any issues with that, but just a reminder, niceness first. With that said, I think I see some names that I don't recognize or maybe haven't been on the call for a while. So if anybody wants to introduce themselves, this is a great opportunity. So feel free to jump in. You have a few minutes.
Hello there. Michal Flandry, engineering manager at Kong. I work with Shane, Mike, and Mattia on the Kong Ingress controller. Nice to meet you all.
Awesome. Welcome. Dan?
Hi, I'm Dan. I am at Isovalent, but I also maintain another layer 4 load balancer project, not unlike MetalLB. There's been bits of communication that I've been having all around kind of the TCP UDP route implementation where we're not in charge of the data plane, where we need kubeproxy and things like that. So I've been working on an implementation that's going to be a new controller for both MetalLB and for kubevip. So yeah, this is my first Gateway API meeting.
That is awesome. I'm excited to see where that goes. Anyone else?
Hello. I just joined because I had the wrong link, but my name is Jeremy Morris. I recently joined Microsoft on the service mesh team with Keith Maddox. So yeah, it's my first time attending this meeting.
Cool, welcome.
Thank you.
Hello Dan, I'm Giga Salato. I'm a software engineer at Red Hat. Well, I've been working with the Quadrant team on policy implementation for existing gateway providers. So we're not actually implementers of Gateway API, rather we are providing implementations of policies, different kinds of policies for the existing gateway implementations. I don't think it might be my first time in this particular meeting, but I've been attending to the Gamma 1 from time to time.
Great, welcome. And it sounds like you've picked a very relevant meeting to be around at, because I think policy is going to be on the agenda in not too long. So thanks for being here.
Cheers.
Great. I think that that's everyone, but don't hesitate to as always. Oh, actually, yeah, we've got one more person. Leor.
Yeah, I didn't understand that introduction, but I joined just now. But yeah, I have been contributing a bit for the project, working offline with Rob, based in London, and that's the reason I wasn't joined to most of the meetings, though I joined some of them. So yeah, if the meeting's gonna continue in their time zones, I might be here for more. And yeah, looking forward to contribute more.
Awesome. Yeah, this is a great turnout. It's really cool to see more people from different time zones here.
Me then. So
yeah.
I think I spoke last time. My name is Alex, and yeah, I am joining most of the networking meetings. So I have joined forces with Jay on the KPNG. So I hope that I will be delivering mainly there, but yeah, trying to gather all knowledge that I can about the networking stack that we have here. So yeah, I'm from Europe as well. I don't know if it matters, but
no, that's great. Yeah, no, that's good to hear. The more people we can get from different time zones, the better. So yeah, that's awesome. Welcome. Cool. That's awesome. Yeah, really great to see so many new people make it to this slot. Great. Okay. Well, let me jump right into the agenda then. Hopefully, I haven't missed anyone. Don't hesitate to just jump in if I did.
Yeah. The Zoom feature.
I didn't quite hear you, Shane. I'm not sure if it was just me.
Oh, was it just garbled?
Yeah, kind of.
Sorry, just keep going. I was just saying, feel free to raise your hand with the Zoom feature anytime you
Oh,
want
yeah,
to
yeah.
pop in.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Throughout, that's one detail I missed in the intro to this. This is meant to be an open agenda, so anyone should be able to edit, comment, whatever. So if you have something, feel free to add it. Also, feel free to drop things in chat, raise your hand, whatever works best for you. All right. With that, I think we've got a packed agenda, so let's get into it. First up, we finally got V0.70 out the door. Thank you to everyone that helped contribute to this one. Yes, it's been a long time coming, and real excited to see this one out. And I know we had kind of frozen most merges until this release went out, so I think there are plenty of people that are also happy to see PRs coming back in and merging again. And you know, I imagine that there are some that I have lost from my radar. So, and I imagine that's true for many. So if you have a PR that has been on hold because we said, well, we can't merge right now because we're releasing, please don't hesitate to ping on that again, and we'll try and get back to it. Yeah, and we've got time for triage at the end, where I'm sure we'll get back into that later. The one thing that is worth pointing out here is John Howard raised and fixed this issue with conformance tests. There was a change that made it into RC2 that apparently made our conformance tests fail when using IPv6 addresses. That is now fixed, but that fix did not make it into 0.70. Which means we will need an 0.71 at some point. So with that said, I just want to encourage people. We're going to say around 2 weeks until we want to get that next patch release out. So that gives us a window to find any other bugs we might think of, or really I'll just highlight anything that we consider in scope for a patch version. That includes clarifications, updates that fix a bug, so basically bug fixes, and then conformance test fixes. But maybe the most important one that may not be something like you'd think of is we do allow and even encourage additional conformance test coverage as long as that's for existing features. So features that have already been released, we're willing to accept conformance tests and get them released in a patch version. So we have a number of conformance test PRs out there, like I think one's for request mirroring as an example. That's a feature that already exists, so it's fair game for this patch version. Because it's a patch release, you need to cherry pick. We can get back into that a little bit later. But yeah, anyway, that's coming up soon. And then just to try and set a rough timeline for where we're headed as a project, we're probably going to do an 0.8.0 that's really tiny and focuses on just Gamma graduating to experimental. It has largely hit all the requirements for that, but we just need to make the changes in the API itself to say, you know, this is how you use it with Gamma. We have some gaps, but we haven't written that in the API spec anywhere. So I think that's something that's going to come pretty soon. Maybe I can defer to, I think Mike, or Keith, John. I don't know if any of you are on the call, if you have opinions on this, but I feel like we're awfully close to ready to graduate this one.
I
Yeah.
think we're pretty close. There is just kind of one piece of just the mesh gateway interaction, and I think the conclusion is that we're probably not going to be able to be too prescriptive, but we'll still need to put something, either add an existing gap or just add something about the reasons, what the rationale behind that. But yeah, I think we're pretty close. 6 weeks sounds right.
I'm meeting
Great.
with Flynn later today and hoping to get that into a revised and publicly, a state where it is reviewable.
But even given that, it feels like I'm with Keith. 6 weeks seems kind of sane.
Great. Yeah, that's great to hear. So that gives us a pretty short timeline where, again, this minor release that we're targeting is primarily about just, marking Gamma as experimental and then opening the doors up for 1.0.0, which is coming awfully quickly. I tried to do some rough math, but if we're targeting a release before KubeCon, which is the goal, that gives us around 16 weeks from today to have it ready for API review. So yay, that's a lot to do over the summer, but our release blocking issues for 1.0 are getting to be a fairly small list. So again, those are our goals. And I think we've mentioned this in previous meetings, but again, what we're considering in scope for a 1.0 release is graduating gateway class, gateway, and HTTP route to GA. There's a milestone that covers it, but those are, the high level goals for 1.0. Okay, so that's a lot, and I want to keep on moving because there's plenty more on this agenda. Let me hand it over to Shane.
Yeah, this one is just a single tier I wanted to share with you all, but we did get into multiple pages of PR reviews recently, and I'm sure now that we've released V070, we'll be able to shore that up, but just wanted to make a general call out. If you're a reviewer, we appreciate you signing up to be a reviewer. If you're not a reviewer, still may be very helpful to us, especially over the course of these next few months to help get GA out the door by Chicago. If anybody who can spare some time to review just jumps in, helps us shore up some of this backlog of PRs, even just jumping in and being like, hey, what can we do to kind of refocus this, or who's blocked, what are they blocked on, is there something I can help to facilitate? That kind of stuff can be helpful, and we appreciate it if you have the time. So that's all. We have the project on the, if you go to the projects page, the road to GA, which you should see some updates on soon. Nick, Rob, and I are going to kind of sit down and start seeing if there's ways to streamline that a little bit better, but it's currently in pretty much the right shape. And for the most part, I think everything that's for GA that needs to be reviewed is on that board. So you can see that there too. And that's pretty much it for that one. For the next one, I think this crowd is just different enough that I'll give a brief introduction to what Bleakst is. So last year, Bleakst started as an experiment at Kong, which we were just kind of playing around with eBPF and seeing what we could do to build a load balancer out of it. As the Gateway API project, we kind of thought it would be a useful tool to use for conformance testing, maybe for some reference implementation for a control plane with Gateway API, because it only uses Gateway API. It doesn't have a history in any other APIs. And also for like CI and stuff like that for layer 4. So it is a Gateway API implemented load balancer, only does layer 4, TCP and UDP route right now. And it the data plane is written in Rust with eBPF. This is an interesting, fun project, and it's on its way to the CNCF. We are donating it for the purposes we just covered. But there's some here. Actually, let me share my screen a little bit, if I may, Rob. For those of you who don't know, I think this is, can you see the repository?
Yep.
So for those of you who don't know, there is a little bit of intrigue going on with the CNCF, which you can find in the discussions board for the project here, where GPL licensing kind of unexpectedly caused some, I'll just call it intrigue. So it's taking a little bit of time, but my understanding is that we should probably be looking at it finally being merged into Kubernetes SIGs over the course of the next few months. A couple months. They said June was when they were going to start sitting down and like finishing their legal review. So anyway, I digress a little bit, but I wanted to give some people some ramp up. If you're interested, check in with us offline on the Gateway API channel. We did just release V020, which includes the very basic initial support for TCP route. So that's what's going on with the project now. And that was a major milestone to get us ready to not only do all the things we said with like testing and stuff like that with Gateway API, but it's also a stepping stone for us to start helping build out layer 4 conformance tests, which still don't exist, though we have several implementations doing L4. So that was another point of this project. One of the things we kind of have been using it for is a way to help push L4 forward a bit, because there's been a lot of static in that area, and yet we know there are implementations. So hopefully it can be helpful in just kind of wearing the banner for that, and everybody else will jump in. It sounds like Dan Finneran might have something that could kind of come in on that angle. And then I know we have the Stunner project, and then we have a couple other UDP route implementations. So cool. I figured I'd give a quick demo. I don't know. We don't have a ton of time. I'll try to make it very quick. And if it doesn't work or something, I won't try to sit around and make you guys watch me fix it or anything. But I thought it'd be interesting to just see it working. So on the right here, you have the data plane logs. Basically just an eBPF program sitting in the kernel that will more or less, there's some details, but more or less respond to a TCP route being created by taking the VIP, the IP address, and then routing it to whatever backend pod IPs. Very, basic kind of balancer. And on the left, we'll kind of get it running, but we have now in a repository.
We can't see your screen, mate.
Okay. That might be a Zoom thing. I've noticed that sometimes I have to do it twice. Now, do you see it?
No.
No, it's still
Okay, well, I'll do one more time here, and if it doesn't work, I'll maybe give up, because I don't want to take too much time with such a huge agenda.
Actually, work for me.
Third time's a charm.
You see it now?
Looks good from here.
Okay. Try to keep this quick. So anyway, on the right data plane, I hope I glossed over what it's doing, but basically sees TCP route, sets up a BPF redirect to the pod IPs. And then on the left here, we added, so if you're interested in this, some samples for TCP route, which includes a little basic server, the TCP route, and a gateway for it, which we'll deploy here. And you will actually see some errors on the right because I'm running on main right now and we just updated something, but it should work. Aya, our BPF library in main, we updated, and apparently it broke some stuff. So it broke logging. So the logging isn't quite right at the moment, but everything else seemed to be working when I tested it. So when we create the gateway, it should give us a gateway with an IP address. So there's our IP. And then we have our TCP route, which is just, at this point, it's just an HTTP server behind it for the sample. And it's pretty much as simple as, if it's working, ta-da. Yeah, so there's a little test server back there. This is a little test server that I wrote. It's kind of similar to HTTP bin, if you're familiar with that. It has a couple of different like status endpoints and stuff that you can hit. And you can see on the right, the data plane is picking it up. And the big work that had to be finished recently was egress. TCP ingress had been working for a while, but we'd kind of been off the Blix project for a few weeks because of KubeCon and stuff. We got back, the egress is now working. If you're interested, it's all under the data plane, eBPF source, ingress and egress tcp.rs. And it's all very simple right now. It's not doing, it's not ready for production. It's never really going to be intended for that. But if you're interested, we would definitely love to have you as this is ramping up, and hopefully we'll be in Kubernetes 6 soon. So that is the end of my demo.
Cool. Yeah, thank you,
Congrats.
Shane. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a lot of work. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, let's keep on running then. Conformance profiles. Mattia, are you on this call?
Yes, I am here.
Awesome.
Okay. Hi all. I'm Mattia. I work at Kong, and today we wanted to showcase something about the conformance profile feature that Shane has been leading, and he broke the GB, and then we worked together to make it working in an actual implementation, which is the Kong Kubernetes Ingress Controller. May I share the screen?
Yes, definitely. 1 second.
Yeah.
All right, you should be good.
Okay. Can you see it? I hope so.
Yep.
Okay. Well, basically, the first intention was to do some demo of the conformance profile PR that I linked in the meeting notes, but it would take some time. So this is I will showcase a result that I just created a half an hour ago. So here we wanted to show how an implementation could use this new feature, this new experimental conformance test suite to claim a conformance on a certain profile. So basically here we have the conformance test file. This is for Kong Kubernetes Ingress Controller. And here is the instantiator, the function to create this new conformance test suite with the set of options, of the usual options for the conformance test suite. And then we have a set of features that we claim to be conformant with, a set of skipped tests because maybe our implementation doesn't support such tests. And here we have 2 additional fields. The first one is the conformance profiles we want to claim our conformance against. And the second one is the implementation with all the implementation details. So we will have the organization, project URL, and so on and so forth. For what concerns the conformance profile, here we have 2 different conformance profiles, which are the HTTP and the TLS ones. And in the Gateway API, we can see that the HTTP conformance profile defines a set of core features, which are support gateway, reference grant, and HTTP route. And the same goes for the TLS conformance profiles, which requires gateway again, reference grant again, and TLS route. The HTTP route has an additional set of extended features with all the non-core features, while the TLS conformance profile has no extended feature at the moment. So basically, here we are trying to claim our conformance with these 2 profiles, and let's say the path is the same as usual. So we instantiate the suite, we call setup, then run as always, and here a new function has been added which is called report, and the report basically gather all the outcome of the G Suite run, and will create a structured information of such a run. And here we can see this information. Basically, this is the outcome of the conformance profile run. As a first step, we have the implementation. So we have all the details of the implementation. Then date. Gateway API version is a field that still needs to be addressed. Basically, we want to have the specific commit of the Gateway API we are trying to be conformant with. But this is still to be done, and it will be addressed in future iterations of the problem. And here we have a set of profiles. As we saw before, we have the HTTP and TLS profiles, and some information, some status information. The first one is the one related to core, then extended. And the core with HTTP, we have that the result is partial because we passed 25 test cases, and we have 3 skipped tests. For this reason, we are not successful, but we are partial. But if we would have some failing tests, the result would be failure because of those failing tests. While for the extended, this is slightly different, because even if we are not passing, even if we are not supporting all the extended feature, we can get the success badge, because we are explicitly saying that we are going to support only HTTP route method matching in this case, for example. So if we pass this test, we can see that here is number 1 for test passed, and the result is success. And the intention is that by having this statement, success, partial, or failure, along with the supported and unsupported features, we have all the information needed to understand the current status of the implementation and all the details about the supported and unsupported feature. Here we have the TLS section, which is kind of the same with some other skipped tests. So we are again partially conformant. And an interesting thing is that we have 2 different test cases which are skipped in both suites, in both profiles, which are related to the gateway. And this happens because in the core features of the HTTP route and the TLS route, we have both those features specified. So if we skip some tests belonging to those features, they will be marked as skipped in both profiles. So here is a very quick overview. The PR is in review at the moment, and it will need some further iteration on the problem to address what is missing and to improve the mechanism.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Mattia, and doing all the work on this. Any comments or questions on this one?
I will just add. Go ahead.
It looks cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really happy with the partial, failed, partial, and success metrics. And I think the being able to be that the fact that the extended part is you claim that you support some extended features, and the success is based on whether you pass the test for the features that you claim you support. That's exactly what I was hoping.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I want to add on top of that because Mattia and I worked on this, but our intention, this is underneath an experimental Go build tag. So it's not part of the regular build. It's in the V070 tag, but not by default. What we'd really like to see is more other implementations. It would be nice if we could get 2 other implementations to come and try the experimental conformance test suite. I think we've already had one. Sanjay may have already done it. And feed into the GEP, because this is part of the prototyping stage of the GEP, which is the new status for provisional GEPs, where you prototype to feed back into your proposal. It would be very great if we could have more than just us at Kong as writing that GEP, and because otherwise I expect that we'll get to the point where we're in experimental and we'll have to come back and do stuff. If you come along with us along the way, we should be able to get things more right. And it's really important to hopefully get at least this part of the machinery done by GA. We're basically saying, I think we're at the point where we're like, all the display layers and other stuff doesn't need to be necessarily done by GA, but we do want to have the core conformance profiles and reporting machinery done by GA, like in a GA state where we would ship them to people and say, you can run this and then send us back your reports. So call out to people, please do jump in. It's pretty easy to get it up and running. We have an example we can provide from our ingress controller if that's helpful from the Go side. There isn't a CLI right now. That would be a next good iteration, and there's an open issue for that. What else can I say about that? I don't want to take up too much time, except I think we'll get a much better result if we can get more people, at least 2 more implementations involved in these early stages. Because the next big step here is probably going to try to take it to experimental or graduating it, and we should be doing that as soon as we can because of the time frame we're aiming for.
Yeah,
Thank you,
that's awesome.
Yeah, and thank you, Mattia, very much for running through all that.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is great. I will just, for the sake of time and seeing our agenda, still have plenty on here. I'm going to keep on running. Nick, I think you're up next.
Yeah. I just want to note here. This happened to us with people upgrading between Cilium 113 and 1.4, but we sort of leave the changing over the CRDs up to the user, and so if they forget, they get a very unhelpful error message from Cilium saying about not being able to find things and stuff like that. Consider for implementations, I just wanted to note, consider checking for the presence of different versions and warning about them. If you're not going to, right now we don't provide an API conversion webhook for Gateway API objects because it's a bit tricky to do that and it's a lot of maintenance. But this is the sort of thing that decision enables. One thing that I did think was if we're not going to do the version conversion webhook, which I don't really think we should yet, we should, however, consider warning you if you're creating old versions that aren't going to do anything. So if you create a V1 Alpha 2 reference grant and the webhook is only doing V1 Beta 1 reference grants, then maybe we should have, for the older stuff, a thing saying, warning when you do.
Did I lose him? Did you lose him?
The admission webhook to give you a warning. Sorry, hello, am I back?
Yeah.
Hey, Nick, try turning your camera off.
Yeah, it's been intermittent. Yeah.
I mean,
British internet. Yeah. So. Yeah. Okay, so let's try that again very quickly. Please consider dynamic version detection. Admission control. I wanted to ask: should we consider with the admission controller having it warn you if you use outdated versions of objects? So if you're doing V1 Alpha 2 gateways, have the admission controller watch for V1 Alpha 2 gateways if they are installed in the cluster and say, hey chief, maybe do beta for now, or later on say, have you heard about that? Those shiny new V1 APIs when they happen, rather than stopping people from doing it, just say, remember that these things are outdated now. You should look into that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call out and something that we're going to have to spend more time thinking about. I think one of the goals and ideas of having CRDs annotated or labeled, I forget what, is that implementations could read from that and say, this is a CRD version that I don't support, and do something with that. That's theoretical and not something that I've seen implemented yet. But definitely at minimum, we need some guidance here, because as we release more versions of the API, like they've been backwards compatible, but as Nick kind of alludes to, at some point, we're going to have to, well, we probably will drop Alpha 2. At least that's what we've been encouraged to do. It's been in a deprecated state. So I think just the very nature of it being deprecated means if you try and use an API version that's marked deprecated in the CRD, you're going to get a warning. But again, it's just, we need to spend.
Yeah. That's it. That's if you've applied the CRDs that include the deprecation warning.
Yeah. So it's like a twofold thing of, one, the controller needs to be able to warn if it sees a CRD version that is older than it supports. And then two, or something like needs to, but probably the controller, because that's the only thing that, and then second, the CRDs themselves need to warn when somebody's using a deprecated version. I think that last part's happening. It's just that, like you're saying, people may just not upgrade CRDs. But they may upgrade their controller.
That would only happen when you apply a CRD with a deprecated version, right? You're not going to get warnings if you upgrade and happen to have some deprecated versions already stored.
Correct. It's only when you So there's another thing out there, storage version migrator, which we should probably document, that can migrate all your things for you we will need to document that before we drop any API versions. I honestly, I think the only API version we'd ever drop would be alpha. I can't imagine us dropping beta ever from a CRD, even if we get to GA. But I don't know. But with that, I know we've got to keep on going here because this agenda is quite long, and this policy attachment discussion is a big one. And I don't know if can anyone. Well, I'll take a circuitous path to this gap. Yeah, okay, here it is. But Flynn, you're the one who wrote, I think, the majority of it. So maybe you can give an intro or in your thoughts.
I actually have, as I mentioned earlier, a long response to a bunch of the comments that I got into shape to post about 5 minutes before this meeting and decided perhaps I'll wait and post it afterwards. I would encourage people to read this one. I'd really appreciate that. There's been some wonderful feedback on it. The short version of this one could be probably summarized as the more that I've gone through and kicked around this stuff with people, the more concerned I am that if we GA policy attachment in its current form, we will end up with a bunch of people who find it extremely difficult to use, enough so that it seems like it would be a danger. And a lot of this is basically trying to illustrate at least one particular way where things could go frighteningly wrong for an end user, and to start trying to figure out what we can do about it. I should also probably point out here, and this is in the response that I'm going to be posting, but to be clear, nothing about this gap should be read as me having anything other than the utmost respect and appreciation for the work that Nick and Rob have done on this one, and other folks who contributed for the original policy attachment gap. In particular, I think Nick deserves props for bearing the brunt of the complaints with grace and good humor, so thank you both for that. It still scares the bejesus out of me to think about this being handed over to people who are not, in fact, Kubernetes experts. So that's the summary of that. Shane, did you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I met with Flynn about this one beforehand and helped to facilitate and be a part of this because I was very persuaded by you'll see in the gap, it doesn't have a solution specifically right now. It's kind of illustrating the problem in a I'll call it a playful way, but it's certainly in a way that helped persuade me that this is a really good time to have this conversation, because you said if we GA policy, but I think we're actually in a state right now with several implementations where if we GA Gateway API, there's going to be a lot of policies coming along. And I am worried about the state of that for people who aren't as technical or as in the know as us. There's a lot of rough edges and there's a lot of action at a distance. So now might be a good time to have this conversation. I think Flynn and I are both incredibly sober to the fact that this may change a lot over the course of conversation. This may just help shape the future or something like that. So just keep that in mind. We're not like this must go forward, like in its current state, we must find a solution along this path, just that we think this is a great time to have the conversation. What is it, 6 months until we're saying we're going to GA gives us some lead time to try to get ahead of some of the problems.
4 months from.
Yeah. Yeah.
What year is it? What?
It's 2023. You might have.
Oh crap! I missed something. Okay. Anyway, so, but yeah, it's meant, I think, as a conversational piece. And again, my bit is just I really was persuaded by the stuff that Flynn had wrote about. Like, this is a scenario that will happen. I believe it will happen. So.
Just a quick note, maybe we can try and time box this so that we're done around the 20 minute mark. So 7 minutes from now for me.
I think time boxing this is going to be critical because we could absolutely talk about this for another 3 hours.
Hopefully we piqued people's interest to go join in on the PR. It's 2015.
The PR is 2015. The year is not 2015.
Oh, sorry. What year is it? Sorry.
Yeah, in 7 minutes, I think the most important thing is first, please go read the PR. Please chime in. I'm honestly not certain if there's stuff that we should try to dive into in this format in 7 minutes, but if there are people who have read the PR and there are things that y'all want to bring up that you think we can tackle in that kind of time, all ears, please do.
Okay, I'll have a crack. So I think that probably the best place to do this is to discuss it on the PR. I put a comment on there earlier today, Flynn. So I'll probably wait to see what your response to my comment already, since you typed it up.
I actually quoted one of the things that you said in there because I thought it was very important.
Okay, cool. Yeah, but I think the key thing that I would sort of want to say about all of this was, yeah, like I think when yeah, that's my response there in my typical very concise fashion.
I was shocked that you had thoughts about it, really, Nick.
So yeah, look, I think it's definitely the case that policy attachment is not anywhere near finished. We have known for ages that we needed something that we had put, Rob and I had put under the broad heading of status. I'm making air quotes now, you can't see, but I am.
Yeah.
That's like effectively handling the two things that are the bullet points there. Those are probably the main things that I think we need to hit. We need to have a standard, simple way for an owner of an object to find that that object is being affected by some policy, and if possible, what policy is affecting it, and what settings have been changed or updated. And yeah, like there needs to be a way, in some fashion, to obtain the resultant set of policy for an object. I.e., for someone who owns a thing to say, hey, something is affecting my object, I need to know what all of the settings that are being changed on my object that I can't see in the spec of my object. That is going to be more and more important as we add things like, there's a PR to add a timeout config to HTTP route. If we're going to have policy that affects that timeout config, that's policy affecting a field, which actually is, I think we did not allow that in the current version of the GEP because of this discoverability problem. And so, I have plenty of thoughts there about ways we could address that. But I think that to me, it really feels like those are the most important things that we need to solve here. And the exact method of solving them is not as important as agreeing that those are the things that as an end user you need to see. The last thing I'll say is it is definitely true that a lot of policy attachment was built on the basis of being either the implementation writer or being the person who was the cluster admin or the infrastructure admin, rather than being the application developer. And because a lot of what we talked about with inheritance is about being able to enforce defaults or overrides, those are concerns that are the cluster owner, the infrastructure owner, the gateway owner, rather than the HTTP route owner, for places where those are separate. And so the discoverability for the HTTP route owner right now is rubbish because we were focusing on solving the problems of the other people, right? I think I always knew that it was a big problem that we needed to do something about. I think you're 100% right to say that we probably need to do something about this before GA, simply because, as Shane alluded to before, once we put GA on the API, regardless of what the GEP says, the GEP says that it's like experimental and not finished. Regardless of what the GEP says, people will expect that means the entire API is to some extent GA. We can try and make that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so it is important that we get some solution sort of at least roughed out for this, so that everyone is heading in generally the same direction before we hit GA. I don't think it needs to be final, but I do think that we need to have some sort of agreement on it. Actually, sorry, there is one more thing I want to say, and that is that there is one dimension here that has not been captured very well at all in the discussions that we've had, and that's about how careful we need to be with the API design to avoid massive API server load from fan out status updates. That is one of the biggest concerns that I've had about this thing, is it's going to be really easy for one object update to produce 100 status updates, which is a great way to completely screw your API server. So we've got to be really careful about the design to make sure we don't end up with that sort of thing.
That is actually That's a concern that I have with respect to the model with policies reaching backwards into resources. Although I actually do need to write that into that comment. Yeah, I basically agree with everything you just said. I think that
Same.
I think it is extremely important to tackle some of these issues from the perspective of the application developer. I tend to think that it's not just a discoverability problem, and I've written some more about that, so I'm not going to try to tackle it here, but just to set the stage so you all know that's coming. And yeah, I would absolutely encourage people to read this and to comment on it, and we'll do more of that. We'll do more of this on this PR.
Cool, thanks. I think maybe that's a good place. Okay.
I'll end it. I just wanted to thank everybody who's been involved in policy. And I know that there's a lot of comments on this, which means there's a lot of thoughts and feelings on this. And I want to reiterate something that Flynn said, that everybody has done a wonderful job. This is a problem that no one person can solve, which is why I'm very grateful that Flynn is joining us, because what we need is to do this together, like build this together, and we'll come up with a good solution. The parallels with ingress annotation Wild West are like very
numerous.
Like burning my face right now. So thank you, Flynn, for joining in. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everybody. We'll build this together. We'll get it right, and we'll ship something that will delight customers and end users.
Yeah, awesome.
Sounds good from here.
Yeah, so there, I expect there's going to be plenty more discussion on this gap. Definitely welcome comments, and it sounds like Flynn's got a big one coming sometime soon.
And
but
the next
as much
one
as
on here, I think is your number 2012.
Yeah.
Which
and
I
so
would also encourage people to look at, because yeah, a bunch of the stuff in there I think is really good stuff. I think is very important. There are definitely things in here that I think are going to help with this problem. So please look at both of these.
Yeah, and so this is, I think there's broad agreement of the problem statement that or some subset of the problem statement that policy attachment is confusing, and that it's hard to understand what has been applied. I think the story, or I think you called it parable in your gap, Flynn, is largely, at least from my perspective, showing that the application owner did not understand that policy had affected their application. So from my perspective, that is, again, going back to this discoverability problem. And this discussion actually technically preceded the gap, but where it came from is I was talking with Shane, and Shane mentioned, oh, Shane, he'd been talking with Flynn, and that policy attachment had problems. I'm like, oh yeah, it does. Maybe we should just open a discussion and, create. And then I didn't realize there was a much bigger thing coming. But I think these two coexist in parallel well. But from my perspective, this is, are there smaller things we can do that can make a world of difference on the existing model? And so this is really meant to gather ideas, because kind of as Shane mentioned originally here, like we are better together, and any one of us cannot think of every possible idea to improve this. So I added some ideas that had been either suggested by others or something that I'd thought about, and some others have also commented with their own suggestions, which is great. Please keep them coming. One of the things that came, this first one came out of a API review with Tim and Cal, this idea of some kind of resource that you could just kubectl git and see all policy that had affected other resources with one single command built into kubectl. It could, contain more than that, but it's an interesting idea. There's also the idea of a kubectl plugin, which has been around since the very beginning. We made sure to structure everything with, we want to make sure this can work with a plugin and with, visualizations, etc. And we just never made any of that, which is unfortunate. There's a lot in here, and I do want to time box myself here. I think the other thing that is really critical here is we need some concept of status or something to understand what has been applied or what has affected it. There has been,
Yeah, that's a big one.
yeah, I think Sunjay had an idea of like actually an effective policy kind of status or resource or something like that. I think that's somewhere below here. Yeah, effective policy configuration. I think that's a really good idea. So yeah, please don't hesitate to add comments, add suggestions, and I think, you know, if we implemented even a couple of these, we'd make a big dent in the problems that we currently have. Yeah. Okay.
And
So
Dan, I was just going to add, yeah, please join. And thank you everybody who joined so quickly on that discussion on the PR, like all this stuff. Like your time is very appreciated. This is a good use of time, even though it's probably a little stressful. We appreciate it very much.
And yeah, thank you. And
we went 5 minutes over, but we didn't do too bad.
Dan Finneran dropped. He said Dan Finneran's thing can be bumped to next week because he had to drop.
Yeah.
So,
so I think that that pushes us off to Dave. Are you still here? Yeah.
Just highlighting this GEP's been rewritten to use the app protocol on the Kubernetes service. If you take a look at the link, there's also a reference to like adding support in Kubernetes for WebSocket. So we'll see how that goes. Right now, it's just like a single protocol that can be listed. Leo, are you still on the call, or did he drop?
I'm here.
So I think the question is about like changing app protocol to be a list so that we can support multiple protocols. But I think in the short term, this could be the mechanic for like someone to say, hey, I'm running WebSocket workload, and the gateway can recognize that. For WebSocket, it might not actually need to do anything, but like for another protocol like HTC, it could be more applicable there. So raising awareness so people review the thing again.
Yeah, thanks for the heads up, and thanks for crossing back over to a KEP as well here.
Yeah,
I know it can be tough to transition between gateway and upstream Kubernetes here. The one thing I'll say is I think Leo already added a comment along these lines, but
yeah, I need to just add that.
I just wanted to bring up as well, like I just wanted to make sure that like if this merge is like your issue is sorted, like I understand like you expressing some interest on making our protocol to a list. It is something we are researching because we didn't find any like huge demand for it yet, and we don't want to build something that no one will do and do an API change. So if there's something you definitely think is good for some purposes, so like maybe...
So that's why I mentioned right now. I think what the GEP is proposing and what the KEP's proposing is compatible, and then the question is like, how do we support one multi-protocol, and how do we support kind of like new protocols that might be kind of like rebased on others? Here's an example. So right now the WebSocket standard is essentially just over HTTP and over TLS. There is newer RFCs for WebSockets over HTTP2 and also HTTP3. So the question is, how do you specify that, like those new ones? I'm less concerned about that for this sort of thing, but like, do we do like WebSocket plus HTTP2? So like we change the constant, introduce a new constant, or can like someone represent that with a list? Like I specify HTTP2 support, and also as an app protocol, and then a subsequent one, a WebSocket, does that imply then that WebSocket over HTTP2? I don't know. Like, so I think for now, I think the single app protocol entry will cover like majority of the use cases, and then we can probably discuss the multi-list and multi-protocol thing as like a separate concern.
Yeah,
But
I think that sounds.
It's
I
actually
think that
interesting
sounds.
to me to, it's interesting to me to think about how it would work with multiple protocols in a list. What happens if you say we can do WSS and also clear text HTTP1 or something like that? Or
Yeah,
even worse would be WebSockets and H3, but only H3 clear. I'm not saying we shouldn't figure that out. I'm just pointing out
that's a big one.
That's actually a really interesting problem to think about,
That's a big one. It's also an open place for implementations to infill whatever they want and kind of diverge from standards. So this is why we're not like running to implement some kind of.
That's why in my GEP I mentioned this handles I think 80% or maybe even 95% of all use cases. And then there might warrant like a special CRD for these like super advanced use cases that most people might not even use. And that might end up being just like a specific to implementations.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I do want to time box us because we are at time, and I know people have to drop. But just I want to highlight that this, although it's in Kubernetes upstream and it's a KEP, this is the right group of people to be reviewing it. The people that will actually be implementing application protocol are not upstream Kubernetes. They're basically the group of gateway API implementations largely. So we need to, as a group, decide where we want this config to live. Service and extending app protocol makes sense to me, but would like some more feedback. And so even though it's in Kubernetes upstream, would appreciate some comments on both the GEP and KEP if you've got time. But with that, we are out of time. So thank you everyone for making it. This has been great to try a different time out. And yeah, hopefully we can do this again. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Have a great one.
Cheers, everybody.